An elderly woman is found injured on the floor of a mansion, begging for her wheelchair taken away by her daughter-in-law. The discovery exposes dark secrets, a missing child, an illegal adoption, and a criminal past rising to the surface. When the truth explodes, the mansion stops being a home and becomes the final stage of justice. The morning in London began with that typical orange hue that tints the sky before the grey of pollution takes over everything. In the south of the city, in a neighbourhood where mansions hide behind high walls and electronic gates, there was a residence that stood out even among the others. 3 floors of travertine marble, large mirrored windows, gardens designed by award-winning landscape artists, and a garage capable of housing 8 imported cars. This was the home of Robert Anderson, a real estate entrepreneur who had built his empire in less than 2 decades. To anyone passing by on the street, that house represented the pinnacle of success. But Maria Smith knew that appearances could be deceiving. She had worked in that mansion for 4 years, taking care of the cleaning, the organization, and especially Mrs. Eleanor, Robert's mother. A 73-year-old woman, her white hair always tied in an elegant bun, with brown eyes that seemed to hold the stories of a lifetime. Mrs. Eleanor had limited mobility due to a spinal problem that had worsened with age, and she depended on a wheelchair to get around the house. Maria was 38, but her face carried a sadness that made her look older. She was a woman of average height, with dark brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her hands calloused from so much work. She had come from the countryside of Yorkshire when she was very young, seeking opportunities in the capital. She had worked in factories, in restaurants, in private homes. Each job was an attempt to fill an emptiness that nothing could occupy, an emptiness that had a name and an age, an emptiness that cried in the dead of night within her memories. That Thursday morning, Maria arrived at the mansion at 6:30, as always. She used her key to open the service door at the back, stored her bag in the small room next to the laundry, and put on the navy blue apron she wore during her shift. The house was still silent. Robert usually woke up at 7 to go to the gym before work, and Valerie, his wife, rarely appeared before 10. Valerie Anderson was the type of woman who made a point of being noticed. A salon blonde, with always impeccable nails and designer clothes, she made a point of mentioning in any conversation. She came from a middle-class family that pretended to be high society, and when she met Robert at a charity gala, she saw in him not a man, but a life project. They had married 3 years ago in a lavish ceremony that made it into all the city's society columns. From the beginning, Maria noticed something strange about Valerie, the way she looked at Mrs. Eleanor with a mixture of disdain and impatience, the seemingly innocent comments about her mother-in-law exaggerating her limitations, the times she purposely forgot to mention medical appointments, but Robert seemed blind, or perhaps he preferred not to see. He loved his mother, that was undeniable. But he also loved his wife with that intense passion of someone who found a partner after years of being alone. Maria went up the service stairs that led to the 2nd floor, where the bedrooms were. She planned to start with Mrs. Eleanor's suite, as she did every day. The elderly woman woke up early and liked to have her breakfast already dressed and neat in her wheelchair on the balcony overlooking the garden. It was one of the few moments of peace she seemed to have in that house, but when Maria reached the 2nd floor corridor, she heard something that made her stop in her tracks, a low, muffled sound coming from Mrs. Eleanor's room. It sounded like a stifled cry, mixed with moans of pain. Maria's heart raced. She ran to the slightly ajar door, and what she saw left her paralyzed for a moment. Mrs. Eleanor was on the floor next to the bed. Her knees were injured, with red marks and small scrapes that were bleeding slightly onto the hardwood floor. She was dragging herself towards the bathroom, her trembling hands gripping the Persian rug, her face wet with tears. She was wearing only her nightgown, and her white hair was disheveled, falling over her shoulders. The scene was heartbreaking. Maria didn't think twice. She dropped the cleaning cloth she was carrying and ran to the elderly woman kneeling beside her. "Eleanor, my God, what happened? Did you fall out of bed?" Mrs. Eleanor looked at her with those brown eyes, now full of shame and suffering. She tried to speak, but the words came out broken by sobs. "My chair, Maria. She took my chair. I woke up and needed to go to the bathroom, but the chair wasn't." Here I tried to call, but no one heard. I tried to get up by myself, but my legs wouldn't hold me. I fell. And then I tried to drag myself, but it hurt so much, Maria. It hurt so much. The housekeeper felt anger rise like a hot wave in her chest. She knew exactly who the she Mrs. Eleanor was referring to was, but first she needed to take care of the elderly woman. Carefully, she helped Mrs. Eleanor lean on her and slowly managed to get her to the bed. She fetched the first aid kit from the bathroom and began to clean the wounds on her knees with a gentleness that contrasted with the fury she felt inside. "Where is your chair, Mrs. Eleanor? Why would Valerie do this?" The elderly woman closed her eyes, as if gathering the strength to tell something that deeply embarrassed her. "Last night, after Robert left for that business dinner, she came in here. She said I was getting too comfortable, that I needed to learn to walk on my own, that I was using the chair as an excuse to be waited on all the time. I tried to explain that the doctor recommended the chair, but she wouldn't listen. She said she was going to put the chair away for a few days so I could learn to manage on my own. As if it were easy. As if I didn't want to walk, Maria. As if I wouldn't give anything to have my legs back the way they were." Tears streamed down Mrs. Eleanor's face again, and Maria felt her own heart tighten. She finished dressing the wounds, helped the elderly woman change her clothes, and settled her back in bed, with pillows supporting her back. Then, without a word, she left the room with a clear objective in mind. Maria descended the main staircase for the first time in months. She usually only used the service stairs, as was expected of her, but at that moment, she didn't care about protocols. She went straight to the master suite on the 3rd floor. The door was closed. She knocked 3 times firmly. "Who is it?" Valerie's irritated voice came from the other side. "It's me, Maria. I need to speak with you. It's urgent." There was a pause, then shuffling footsteps. The door opened and Valerie appeared wearing a pink silk robe, her blonde hair messy, with the expression of someone who had just been woken up and was not happy about it. "What do you want, Maria? You know I don't like to be disturbed this early." The housekeeper took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that threatened to explode into words she couldn't take back. "It's about Mrs. Eleanor. I found her on the floor of her room, injured, dragging herself, because someone took her wheelchair. Do you know anything about this?" Valerie's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, but she quickly composed her expression into a mask of indifference. "Oh, that. I put the chair in the storage room. Eleanor needs to stop being so dependent. She has legs, she can use them. All this whining and moaning of hers has gotten old. My husband works all day to support this house, and that woman just sits there playing the victim. It's time for her to step up." Maria felt her blood boil. She clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to keep her voice calm. "Mrs. Eleanor has a serious spinal problem. The doctor recommended the chair. She's not faking it. She fell, she got hurt, she's in pain. Where is the chair? I'm going to get it now." Valerie took a step forward, invading Maria's personal space with an intimidating posture. "You're not going to do anything. You're a maid here, Maria. I'm the lady of the house. And if I've decided that Eleanor doesn't need the chair, then she doesn't need it. If you're not satisfied, you can look for another job. I'm sure there are plenty of people who would love to work in a house like this." The two women stared at each other for a moment that seemed to last an eternity. Maria knew she was treading on dangerous ground. Jobs were hard to come by, especially for someone over 30 with little formal education. But when she thought of Mrs. Eleanor on the floor, crying in pain and humiliation, she knew she couldn't stay silent. "I'm going to tell Robert. He needs to know what's happening to his mother." Valerie let out a bitter laugh. "Go ahead. See if he believes you or me. I'm his wife, Maria, the woman who shares his bed every night. Do you really think he's going to choose to believe the maid?" And with that she slammed the door in Maria's face. The housekeeper stood there for a few seconds, her heart pounding, her breath ragged. Part of her wanted to go back and continue the argument, but she knew it would be pointless. So she went downstairs, went to the storage room at the back of the house, and started looking for the wheelchair. It took almost 20 minutes, but she finally found it, hidden behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. When she returned to Mrs. Eleanor's room with the chair, the elderly woman was in bed looking out the window with a distant expression. Upon seeing Maria with the chair, her eyes filled with relief and gratitude. "You found it. Thank you, my dear. I don't know what I would do without you." Maria positioned the chair next to the bed and helped Mrs. Eleanor transfer into it. The elderly woman grimaced in pain as she moved her legs, but she didn't complain. "Mrs. Eleanor, I have to tell Robert what's happening. You can't keep going through this. It's not fair. It's not right." The elderly woman took Maria's hand with a surprising strength for someone so frail. "I know, my child, I know, but I'm afraid of what might happen if you tell him. Valerie is vindictive. She could make you lose your job, and I don't want that. You're the only person in this house who treats me with kindness. I don't want you to suffer because of me." Maria felt her eyes sting, but she held back the tears. "I don't care about the job, Mrs. Eleanor. I care about you, and I'm going to tell him. He needs to know. Because if she took your chair today, she might do something worse tomorrow, and I won't allow it." Mrs. Eleanor nodded slowly, and the two of them sat there holding hands in a moment of silent connection that said much more than words ever could. The rest of the morning passed in a palpable tension. Maria went about her tasks mechanically, always alert to any movement upstairs. Valerie didn't come down for breakfast, which was unusual. She usually made a point of appearing well-dressed to have her coffee with organic fruits and green juice, even if it was just to post a photo on social media. Mrs. Eleanor stayed in her room, refusing to come down to the living room as she usually did. She said she preferred to be quiet, that she was tired. But Maria knew it was fear. Fear of encountering Valerie, fear of more humiliation, fear that the situation would worsen. Robert normally only came home late in the afternoon, after spending the day at the office and in site visits and meetings with investors. But that day, for some reason Maria didn't know, he showed up early. It was almost 3 in the afternoon when she heard the sound of the garage opening and the characteristic rumble of his car, a black BMW that he adored. Maria was in the kitchen preparing the lunch that Mrs. Eleanor had barely touched. When she heard Robert enter through the front door, calling for his mother as he always did, she knew it was time. She couldn't put it off any longer. She dried her hands on her apron and went to the living room, where Robert was taking off the blazer of his grey suit. Robert was 42 and looked like a man who took care of himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair already starting to show grey at the temples. Blue eyes he had inherited from a Portuguese grandfather. He was a man who worked hard, but who also knew how to be attentive to those he loved. At least, that's what Maria had always thought. "Robert, I need to talk to you. It's about Mrs. Eleanor." He stopped arranging his blazer on the sofa and looked at Maria attentively. "What happened to my mother? Is she all right?" Maria took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. "This morning I found her on the floor of her room, injured. She had tried to drag herself to the bathroom because someone had taken her wheelchair. Her knees are hurt. She was crying in pain. It was Valerie who took the chair, Robert. She said your mother needs to learn to walk on her own, that she's too spoiled. But you know the doctor recommended the chair. Your mother isn't faking it. She's suffering." Robert's face changed completely. The relaxed expression gave way to something between shock and restrained anger. He said nothing for a moment, just processing the information. Then, without a word, he quickly went up the stairs, heading straight for his mother's room. Maria followed him, keeping a respectful distance. When she reached the second-floor corridor, she saw Robert entering Mrs. Eleanor's room. The door was left open, and she could hear the conversation. "Mum, what happened? Maria told me you got hurt. Why didn't you call me?" Mrs. Eleanor's voice came out low, tired. "Son, I didn't want to worry you. You already have so much on your mind. I was trying to handle it myself. Show me the injuries." There was a pause. Maria imagined Mrs. Eleanor showing her bandaged knees. Then she heard Robert's voice, now trembling with contained rage. "Who did this to you, Mum? And don't tell me it was an accident." Another pause, then Mrs. Eleanor's fragile voice. "It was Valerie. She took my chair last night. She said I need to learn to walk on my own. But son, I can't. My legs won't hold me. I tried, God knows I tried, but I fell. And then I tried to drag myself to the bathroom, and that's when Maria found me." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with emotion. Then Maria heard quick footsteps. Robert came out of his mother's room, his face red, with anger, and went up the stairs leading to the third floor where his suite was. Maria stayed in the corridor, unsure whether to leave or stay. The shouting started almost immediately. Robert's voice echoed through the house, a rare occurrence for a man who had always been so controlled. Maria couldn't make out all the words, but the anger was unmistakable. And then she heard Valerie's voice, high-pitched and defensive, trying to explain herself. "You're believing her instead of me? She's exaggerating, Robert. Your mother plays the victim all the time." "My mother has injured knees, Valerie. She was on the floor, dragging herself like an animal. How could you do that to an elderly person? To my mother? I was just trying to help. She needs to move more, not depend on that chair for everything. You're not a doctor." Her orthopedist recommended the chair. "You had no right to make that decision." The argument continued, growing more heated. Other words were said. Accusations were made. Maria heard Valerie try to turn the tables, saying that Robert never supported her, that he always sided with his mother, that she was treated like a stranger in her own home. But Robert wasn't listening. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "I want you to leave this house, Valerie, now. I need some time to think about all of this, about us, about what you did, because what you did to my mother was cruel. And I don't know if I can forgive that." There was a cry of outrage from Valerie, followed by the sound of slamming doors, of drawers being yanked open, of things being thrown. Robert came down the stairs minutes later, his face still red, his fists clenched. He looked at Maria, who was still in the corridor, and something in his eyes softened for a moment. "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for taking care of her." Maria just nodded, not knowing what to say. Robert went back into his mother's room, and she heard his voice, now softer, apologizing, saying he didn't know, that he would never have allowed it if he had known. Half an hour later, Valerie came down the stairs carrying a large suitcase. Her face was stained with mascara, her blonde hair messy, her expression one of pure hatred. She walked past Maria without a word, but the look she gave her could kill. It was a look that promised revenge, that said this wasn't over. And Maria, without knowing it yet, was completely right. This was just the beginning, because Valerie was not the type of woman to accept defeat in silence. And the decisions she would make in the coming hours would trigger a series of events that would reveal secrets buried for decades, secrets that would change the lives of everyone in that mansion forever. The sun was beginning to set over London, painting the sky orange and purple. But inside that house of marble and perfect appearances, the darkness was just beginning to reveal itself. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. To continue, night fell over London with that typical autumn urgency. The city lights began to switch on one by one, creating a sea of luminous dots that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the mansion in Kensington, the silence was heavy, laden with tension and unspoken words. Robert had stayed with his mother for hours, talking, apologizing, promising he would take better care of her. Mrs. Eleanor, always so strong and dignified, had allowed herself to cry in her son's arms, releasing a pain she had been holding in for months. It wasn't just about the wheelchair or the injured knees. It was about feeling invisible, about being treated like a burden, about being afraid in the very house she had helped build. Maria had prepared a light dinner, a vegetable soup with shredded chicken, Mrs. Eleanor's favorite dish. She served the two of them in the elderly woman's room, on a small table she had carefully set up. Robert thanked her with a tired look, and she noticed he seemed to have aged 10 years in that single day. After washing the dishes and tidying the kitchen, Maria grabbed her bag and prepared to leave. It was past 9 o'clock, well beyond her usual hours, but she didn't mind. She lived alone in a small flat in East London, a journey of almost an hour and a half by bus and tube. It was a simple space, just a bedroom, living room, kitchen and bathroom, but it was hers. Or rather, it would be hers once she finished paying the mortgage installments that would stretch over the next 15 years. She was leaving through the service door when she heard quick footsteps behind her. It was Robert. "Maria, Wait a moment. She turned, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. Yes? Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he made when he was nervous. I wanted to thank you, truly, for taking care of my mother, for telling me what was happening. I know you risked your job by doing that. Valerie can be very vindictive, and I don't want you to suffer any consequences for doing the right thing. Maria shook her head. I didn't do anything special, Robert. I just did what any decent person would do. Mrs. Eleanor is a wonderful person. She deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. He nodded, his blue eyes reflecting a deep sadness. I know. I should have noticed sooner. I should have paid more attention. But I was so focused on work, on business, on building more, earning more, that I ended up neglecting what really matters. And now, I don't know how to fix it. How to fix my marriage, how to protect my mother, how to move forward. Maria felt a pang of compassion for this man, who despite all his wealth and success seemed as lost as she was. Sometimes we need to stop trying to fix everything and just make choices. Choose what's most important. Choose to stand by those who truly love us, not those who just take advantage of us. Robert looked at her with an expression of surprise, as if those simple words had touched something deep inside him. You're wise, Maria. Wiser than I am. She gave a sad smile. I'm not wise. I'm just someone who has lost a lot in life and learned that what really matters isn't what we have, but who we love and who loves us back. There was a comfortable silence between them for a moment. Then Maria said goodbye and left through the service door, walking along the side of the house to the main gate. The street was quiet, lit by yellowish street lamps. She started walking towards the bus stop when something caught her attention. Across the street, leaning against a black car with tinted windows, was a man. He was smoking a cigarette, the red ember glowing in the dark. When he saw Maria looking, he dropped the cigarette on the ground, stepped on it and got into the car. The vehicle pulled away slowly, but it didn't leave. It circled the block, as if waiting for something. Maria felt a shiver run up her spine. Something about that scene wasn't right, but she pushed the thought away, attributing her unease to the stressful day she'd had. She quickened her pace to the bus stop, and when the bus arrived, she got on with a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Robert was climbing the stairs towards his room. On the third floor, the master suite that Valerie had transformed into a sanctuary of luxury and vanity was strangely silent without her. The closet was a mess, with empty hangers where expensive dresses once hung. The dressing table was too clean, without the bottles of imported perfume she collected. He sat on the edge of the king-size bed and picked up his phone. He had 5 missed calls from Valerie and a series of messages. He opened the conversation, but didn't read everything. The first few said enough. You're going to regret this. I did everything for you, and this is how you treat me. You'll be begging for me to come back. And I know things you don't want anyone to know, Robert. That last message made him pause. What things? What was she talking about? He reread the sentence several times, feeling a growing anxiety in his chest. But he decided not to reply. Not tonight. He was too tired, emotionally drained. He threw his phone on the bed and went to take a shower, hoping the hot water could wash away some of the tension he was carrying. In West London, in a flat decorated with taste but without the ostentation of the mansion, Valerie paced back and forth across the living room, her phone glued to her ear. She had called 3 friends, telling her version of the story, painting herself as the victim of a husband, manipulated by his mother-in-law and an envious maid. But her friends, who knew her well, just murmured words of support, without much conviction. Furious, Valerie ended the last call and threw her phone on the sofa. She picked up a bottle of red wine she had brought from the mansion and poured a generous glass. She drank it, in large gulps, feeling the liquid burn its way down her throat. But the wine didn't calm the rage that was boiling inside her. It wasn't just about being kicked out of the mansion. It was about being humiliated, about losing control, about seeing her plan for a perfect life crumble because of a useless old woman and a maid who didn't know her place. She picked up her phone again and opened her contact list. She scrolled to a name she hadn't seen in years. A name that brought back memories of a time she preferred to forget, but which she had always known she could use when necessary. Oswald Mason. Her finger hovered over the name for a moment. Making that call meant crossing a line from which there was no return, but Valerie was beyond caring about lines or consequences. She dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. A hoarse, masculine voice came from the other side. "Who is this?" "Oswald. It's me. Valerie." There was a pause. Then a low, humorless laugh. "Valerie, long time no see. What do you want?" "I need a favor. A big favor. And I know you have the right tools to help me. That's going to cost you, and I'm not just talking about money. I know, and I'm willing to pay. Then tell me what you need." Valerie smiled, a cold, calculating smile, and she began to speak. The next morning, Maria arrived at the mansion at her usual time. The house was quiet, but there was a different feeling in the air, as if something had changed during the night. She did her routine chores, prepared breakfast for Mrs. Eleanor, helped the elderly woman get dressed and settled in her wheelchair. The wounds on her knees were already better, but they still hurt. Mrs. Eleanor winced whenever she had to move her legs, but she didn't complain. She never complained. She was a woman accustomed to enduring pain in silence. Robert came down for breakfast around 8 o'clock. He was dressed for work, in an impeccable navy blue suit, his hair combed back, but there were deep, dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious he hadn't slept well. "Good morning, Mum. Maria." The 2 women returned the greeting. He poured himself some coffee, took a piece of toast, but barely touched the food. He fiddled with his phone, reading messages, answering emails. After a few minutes, he stood up. "I'm heading to the office. I have meetings all day. Call me if you need anything." He kissed his mother's forehead and left through the front door. Maria and Mrs. Eleanor were left alone in the dining room. The elderly woman looked at the housekeeper with a worried expression. "Do you think he'll get back together with her, Maria?" The question caught Maria by surprise. She thought for a moment before answering. "I don't know, Mrs. Eleanor. I think that depends on many things. On how much he really loves her, on how much he's willing to forgive, on how much she's willing to change. She won't change. I know women like her. Valerie didn't marry my son for love. She married him for what he could give her, for the mansion, the cars, the status. And now that that's been threatened, she'll do anything to get it back. I'm scared, Maria, very scared." Maria squeezed the elderly woman's hand. "I'm here. I'll protect you. I promise." Mrs. Eleanor smiled, but it was a sad smile, laden with a wisdom that came from decades of life. "You're a good girl, Maria, a pure soul. Sometimes I look at you and I see so much sadness in your eyes, a deep, old sadness. You've lost someone, haven't you?" The question hit Maria like a punch to the gut. She felt tears welling up but held them back. "I have. A long time ago. But the pain never completely goes away." Mrs. Eleanor nodded, understanding. "I understand. There are pains we carry forever, scars that never fade. But do you know what keeps me alive, Maria? It's knowing that despite all the pain, there is still goodness in the world. There are still people like you, and that makes it all worthwhile." The 2 of them sat there in silence, sharing a moment of connection that went beyond words. It was as if, somehow, they recognized in each other the same open wound that had never fully healed. The day passed quietly, almost normally. Maria did her chores, took care of Mrs. Eleanor, prepared lunch and dinner. Robert arrived late, almost 10 at night, exhausted and taciturn. He ate in silence, said good night to his mother, and went up to his room. Maria was in the kitchen washing the last of the dishes when she heard the noise. It was a low sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the front of the house, as if someone was tampering with the main gate. She turned off the tap and stood still, listening intently. The sound came again. Footsteps in the front garden. Her heart sped up. She left the kitchen slowly and went to the living room, which had a large window overlooking the front garden. She peeked through the curtains, and what she saw made her freeze. There was a man standing in the garden looking at the house. He was tall, strong, dressed in dark clothes, and he was smoking a cigarette. The same man she had seen the night before across the street. Maria ran to the stairs and climbed them quickly, without making a sound. She went straight to Robert's room and knocked on the door urgently. "Robert, Robert, wake up!" The door opened seconds later. Robert was shirtless, his eyes sleepy, confused. "Maria? What's happened?" "There's a man in the garden. He's out there looking at the house. I think we're in danger." Robert's face changed instantly. He grabbed his phone and called the private security that monitored the gated community. He spoke quickly, gave the address, described the situation. Then he went to the closet, grabbed a shirt, and went down the stairs with Maria behind him. When they reached the living room and looked out the window, the man was gone. But Robert saw something that made him turn pale. On the entrance gate, there was a message written in red paint. "You owe me, and I've come to collect." Robert read the message 3 times, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Maria noticed he had started to tremble. "Robert, who is that man? What does that message mean?" He didn't answer immediately. He just kept staring at the gate, his face now completely white. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, full of fear. "He's someone from my past, someone I thought I'd never see again. But what does he want? Why is he doing this?" Robert closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to tell something he had kept hidden for years. "A long time ago, when I was starting my business, I needed money. A lot of money. The banks wouldn't give me credit. I was a nobody from a simple family, trying to break into a market controlled by rich, traditional families. Then I met this man, Oswald Mason. He offered me the money I needed. He said I would just need to do a few favors for him in the future, favors related to my real estate ventures." "What kind of favors?" Robert opened his eyes and looked directly at Maria. "Money laundering, fake documents, fictitious purchases. I helped him clean money that came from illegal activities. And in return, he helped me build my empire. But that was almost 20 years ago. I paid back everything I owed. I cut all ties with him more than 10 years ago. I don't do anything illegal anymore. My businesses are clean now, or at least I thought they were. And why would he come back now, after all this time?" Robert shook his head. "I don't know. But I have a suspicion. Valerie knows him. She was the one who introduced him to me years ago, before we got married. At the time, I didn't make the connection. I thought it was a coincidence. But now I'm starting to think that nothing was a coincidence, that she always knew who he was, what he did, and that she might have called him to get revenge on me for kicking her out of the house." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. The situation was becoming much more dangerous than she had imagined. The community security arrived minutes later, 2 uniformed men who searched the garden and the area around the house. They found no one, but they photographed the message on the gate and promised to increase surveillance. Robert called a private security firm and hired 2 guards to be on duty at the house for the next few nights. When everything finally calmed down and the guards were in position, it was past midnight. Maria was exhausted, but Robert insisted she sleep at the house that night, in one of the guest rooms on the 2nd floor. He didn't want her leaving alone, not with Oswald around. She accepted, grateful for his concern. She went to the room Robert indicated, a comfortable space with a double bed, an ensuite bathroom, and a window overlooking the back garden. She took a quick shower, put on a nightgown she found in the wardrobe, and lay down on the soft bed. But sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened, thinking about the mysterious man, Valerie's messages, the fear she had seen in Robert's eyes, thinking also about Mrs. Eleanor, so frail and vulnerable, in the middle of all this chaos, and thinking, as she always did on quiet nights, of the daughter she had lost, of the baby who had disappeared from the hospital nursery 25 years ago, of the void that had never been filled, of the pain that never healed. Maria didn't know yet. She couldn't know that her daughter was closer than she had ever imagined, that the threads of fate were intertwining in impossible and yet perfectly logical ways, that the truth, when it finally came to light, would be as devastating as it was liberating. But for now, on that dark and tense night, she just closed her eyes and tried to sleep, unaware that the worst was yet to come. and that the message on the gate was just the beginning of a storm that would sweep everything away, revealing buried secrets and impossible truths. Outside, hidden in the shadows beyond the mansion's walls, Oswald Mason smoked another cigarette and smiled. His plan was working perfectly. Robert Anderson would pay for what he owed, and this time the price would be much higher than money. It would be destruction. It would be pain. It would be everything he deserved. And Valerie, sitting in her temporary flat, also smiled, because she knew she had planted a seed of chaos, and now she just had to wait and watch it all fall apart. Because if she couldn't have that perfect life, then nobody could. The night deepened over London, and inside that marble mansion, 3 wounded souls tried to rest, unaware that the dawn would bring revelations that would change their lives forever. The morning sun streamed through the silk curtains of the guest room, waking Maria from a restless sleep full of disturbing dreams. She got up slowly, still wearing the borrowed nightgown, and looked out the window. Down below, in the garden, one of the security guards was making his morning rounds. Everything seemed peaceful, almost normal, but she knew it was just an illusion. After getting dressed in the previous day's clothes, she went down the stairs towards the kitchen. Robert was already there, sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in his hands and a lost look in his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. The dark circles were even deeper, and there was a tension in his shoulders that wasn't there before. "Good morning," said Maria, breaking the silence. He looked up, as if returning from a great distance. "Good morning, Maria. Did you sleep well?" She nodded, lying. She poured herself some coffee and sat at the table, keeping a respectful distance. "And you, did anyone try to get in during the night?" "No. The guards didn't report anything, but they cleaned the message off the gate. I didn't want my mother to see that. You did the right thing. She doesn't need any more worries." They sat in silence for a few minutes, drinking coffee, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Robert who broke the silence again. "Maria, I need to tell you something. About my mother. About me. About the origin of all this." She looked at him, intrigued. "My mother was always infertile," he continued. "She and my father tried to have children for years without success. They went through treatments, consulted doctors, but nothing worked. And then, when they had already given up, I appeared. At 2 months old. My father came home from work one day with a baby in his arms and said they had been blessed that they would finally have the child they so desired." Maria felt a tightness in her chest. She had heard stories like this before, stories that never ended well. "I grew up loved, protected, spoiled. My parents gave me everything they could. My father worked hard his whole life to give me an education, opportunities. He was a bus driver, my mother was a seamstress. We lived in a simple house in North London. But to them, I was a prince, the miracle they had waited so long for." "And you never knew the truth? That you were adopted?" Robert shook his head. "Not until my father got sick. In his last days, with his health failing, he called me over and told me. He said he couldn't bear to keep the secret any longer, that he loved me as his true son, but that I deserved to know the truth. That's when he mentioned Oswald Mason. He said he had paid a lot of money for me, all the money they had saved for years, and that Oswald assured him everything was legal, that my biological mother had died in childbirth, and that the family didn't want to keep me. But it wasn't true." Robert looked at his own hands as if they carried a guilt he couldn't wash away. "I don't know. At the time, I believed it. My father was dying. He had no reason to lie. And Oswald disappeared after that. I never saw him again. Until he showed up a few years ago when Valerie introduced him. Said he was an investor, that he could help me with some deals. I was just starting out. I needed capital, connections. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't want to know where his money came from. I just accepted the help. And now he's back to collect. Now he's back to destroy everything I've built. Because he knows that if the truth about my adoption comes out, if they find out I was bought illegally, my reputation will be ruined. My businesses will collapse, and I could even go to prison for associating with his activities." Maria absorbed all that information, feeling the weight of Robert's confession. But there was something that didn't fit, a missing piece of the puzzle. "Robert, have you ever tried to find out who your biological mother is? If she's really alive?" He sighed deeply. I've tried. For years. I hired private investigators. But there were no records, no documents linking my name to anyone else. It's as if I appeared out of nowhere. Oswald did a very good job of erasing any trace. While the two were talking in the kitchen, Mrs. Eleanor was waking up in her room on the second floor. She had spent a restless night, waking up several times from nightmares she couldn't remember upon waking. There was something in the air, a tension she could feel but couldn't name. She managed to transfer to her wheelchair on her own, with effort and pain in her still injured knees. She was preparing to go downstairs when she heard a strange noise. It was coming from the floor above, from the third floor, where the master suite that had belonged to Robert and Valerie was. She stopped, listening intently. Footsteps. Someone was walking around up there. But Robert was in the kitchen. She had heard his voice minutes ago, and Valerie was no longer in the house. So who was there? Mrs. Eleanor felt fear clutch at her chest. She picked up her phone and dialed Robert. The phone rang several times before it was answered. "Son, there's someone on the third floor. I can hear footsteps." Robert's reply was immediate and alarmed. "Stay in your room, Mum. Lock the door. I'm coming up now." Maria and Robert ran up the stairs, followed by one of the security guards, who was in the house. When they reached the second floor, they saw Mrs. Eleanor at her bedroom door, her face pale with fear. Robert signaled for her to go inside and lock the door, and she obeyed immediately. They climbed another flight of stairs to the third floor. The door to the master suite was ajar. Robert went in first, followed by the guard with his hand on the holster of his gun. Maria stayed in the corridor, her heart pounding. The room was ransacked. Drawers were open. Clothes were thrown on the floor. The mattress was pulled aside. Someone had been looking for something in there, and from the state of things they had found it. The closet door was wide open, and inside, the safe built into the wall was open, empty. Robert stood frozen, staring at the breached safe. His voice came out in a shocked whisper. No, this can't be happening." "What was in the safe?" asked the guard. "Documents, contracts, and money. A lot of money. But that's not what matters. There was also proof of everything I did with Oswald. Documents I kept as insurance in case he ever tried to blackmail me. And now he has it all." Maria entered the room slowly, observing the destruction. Something caught her attention. On Valerie's dressing table, a lipstick had been left on purpose, forming a message on the mirror. "I told you you'd regret this." "It was her," said Robert, his voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "Valerie has a spare key to the house. She came in here during the night, got past the guards, stole everything from the safe, and left. And she's probably already given it all to Oswald." The guard took his radio and began communicating with his colleague downstairs, reporting the situation. Robert sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, completely defeated. "It's over. Everything's over. With those documents, he can destroy me. He can destroy my company, my reputation, everything I've built." Maria approached and placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to offer some comfort. "We'll find a solution. Everything will be all right." But even as she said those words, she wasn't sure if she believed them. That's when they heard it. A sound from downstairs, a sound that made no sense. A cry. A child's cry. High-pitched, desperate, echoing through the house. The three of them stood motionless for an instant, processing the impossible. There were no children in that house. There were never any children there. "What was that?" Maria whispered, feeling a chill run down her spine. Robert stood up quickly and ran out of the room, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Maria and the guard followed him. The crying continued, now louder, more distressed. It was coming from the first floor. When they reached the living room, the sound stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even more frightening than the cry. Robert looked around, confused and scared. "Could have been the wind," the guard suggested without much conviction, "or an animal outside." But Maria knew it wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. That was a human cry. A cry she recognized from somewhere deep in her memory. A cry that transported her instantly to the past, to the hospital, to the nursery, to the day her daughter disappeared. She had given birth alone, with no family nearby, without the child's father who had abandoned her upon learning of the pregnancy. She slept after the delivery, exhausted and medicated, and when she woke, up hours later, they told her the baby had been taken for tests. But the tests never ended. The baby never came back. They said there had been a mix-up, a baby swap, a miscommunication. But Maria knew. She knew deep in her soul that her daughter hadn't been lost. She had been stolen. She could never prove it. She was too young, too poor, without the resources or knowledge to fight the system. The hospitals denied any wrongdoing. The police said there was no evidence of a crime, and Maria was sent away empty-handed, her arms aching with emptiness, and her heart broken into pieces that never quite fit back together. And now, 25 years later, in that London mansion, she heard that cry again. Her baby's cry. Impossible, but real as the pain that had never gone away. "Maria." Robert's voice brought her back to the present. "Are you all right? You're pale." She shook her head, trying to compose herself. I'm sorry. It's just that sound reminded me of something. Of someone." Before she could explain, they heard footsteps upstairs. Deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. The three of them looked towards the staircase and saw a figure emerge from the second floor. It was Valerie. She looked different. Her blonde hair was messy, her makeup smeared, her clothes wrinkled. But what was most shocking was the expression on her face. It was a mixture of anger, triumph, and something that looked like madness. In her hands she held a small object, a bracelet, a child's blue fabric bracelet with a small metal star in the center. Maria felt the world spin. She knew that bracelet, or rather, she knew one identical to it. The bracelet they had put on her baby's wrist in the hospital. The bracelet that disappeared along with her daughter. "Surprised to see me," said Valerie, descending the last few steps slowly, savoring the moment. "I never left. I just hid. You think you know me, but you have no idea who I really am, what I'm capable of." The guard took a step forward, his hand on his holster. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the house, now." Valerie laughed, a loud, humorless laugh. "Or what? You'll arrest me? Kick me out of my own home? This house is mine by right. I am the wife. I live here, and I'm not going anywhere until I get what I want." "What do you want, Valerie?" Robert stepped forward, his voice firm despite the visible fear in his eyes. She looked at him with contempt. "I want what belongs to me. Half of everything you have. Half the mansion, half the company, half the fortune. And I'm not leaving here until you sign the papers." "You're insane. I'm not signing anything, and you can forget an amicable divorce. After everything you've done, I'll fight you for every penny." Valerie smiled, dangling the child's bracelet in her hands. "You won't fight for anything, Robert, because if you don't give me what I want, I'll reveal everything. Everything about your adoption, everything about Oswald, and everything about this bracelet." She looked directly at Maria, and there was something cruel in her eyes. "You recognize it, don't you? Can you see the star? Can you read the name engraved on the inside?" Maria took a step forward, trembling. "Give me that bracelet. It's not yours. You have no right to have that." "But I do, because this bracelet belonged to a baby who was sold 25 years ago. A baby who was torn from his real mother's arms and given to a family who paid a fortune for him." Robert turned pale. "What are you talking about?" Valerie turned to him, savoring every word. "I'm talking about you, Robert. You are the baby from this bracelet, and your real mother is closer than you think." And then she extended her hand, pointing directly at Maria. "Her, Maria Smith. She is your biological mother, and I know because it was my Uncle Oswald who arranged your sale. He was the one who stole the baby from the hospital and sold him to your adoptive parents, and I've kept this bracelet all these years as proof, as insurance, knowing that one day I could use this information." The silence that followed was absolute. Maria felt her legs give way. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be true. But as she looked at Robert, at his wide, shocked blue eyes, something inside her stirred, something ancient, instinctive, maternal. Mrs. Eleanor, who had left her room upon hearing the commotion, was at the top of the stairs, listening to everything. She came down slowly in her wheelchair, using the stairlift Robert had installed for her. When she reached the first floor, everyone looked at her. The elderly woman had tears in her eyes. She looked at Maria, then at Robert, and finally spoke, her voice weak but firm. "It's true. I always knew. From the beginning. My husband told me where he had gotten the baby. He said it was from a very young single girl who couldn't raise the child. He said it was for the best, that we were giving the baby a better life. But I knew. Deep in my heart, I always knew it wasn't right. And I've carried this guilt. All these years." She looked directly at Maria, the tears now streaming freely. "And when you started working here, when I looked into your eyes for the first time, I saw something. A sadness I recognized. Because it was the same sadness I saw in the mirror every day. The sadness of a mother who lost her child. And I started to wonder, to suspect. But I was so afraid of the truth that I preferred to pretend I didn't see it." She reached out a trembling hand to Maria. "Forgive me, please, forgive me for stealing your son, forgive me for living the life that should have been yours, for being a mother to a child that wasn't rightfully mine." Maria couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She looked at Robert, who was paralyzed, his eyes fixed on her. And then it all made sense. The dark brown hair, just like hers, the shape of his face, the way he held his coffee cup in the morning, with both hands, exactly like she did. Her son. Robert was her son. The baby she had lost 25 years ago was now a successful adult man standing in front of her, and she had worked in the same house as him for 4 years without knowing. Fate had woven an impossible and yet inevitable path. And now, in front of everyone, the truth had exploded like a bomb that would destroy everything they knew and rebuild it all on new foundations. Valerie watched it all with a satisfied smile. Her plan had worked perfectly. Now she just had to take advantage of the chaos to get what she wanted. But she had underestimated one thing. She had underestimated a mother's love. And a mother's love, when finally unleashed, is the most powerful force in the world. Capable of destroying, capable of healing, and capable of delivering justice when all seems lost. Time seemed to stop in that moment. Maria looked at Robert as if seeing him for the first time. And in a way, that's exactly what was happening. He was no longer her boss, the millionaire, the successful businessman. He was her son, the baby she had held for only a few hours before falling asleep in that delivery room. The baby whose face she had never been able to forget, even after all these years. Robert took a step towards her, his blue eyes filled with unshed tears. You're my mother. My real mother." His voice was that of a lost boy, not a 42-year-old man. Maria felt something break inside her chest, a dam holding back 25 years of pain and grief. The tears began to fall, and she couldn't and didn't want to stop them. "I looked for you for years. I went to the police, the hospital, social workers. No one helped me. They told me you were lost, that there had been a mix-up. But I knew, a mother always knows, I knew someone had taken you from me." Robert closed his eyes, the tears finally escaping. When he opened them again, he took another step towards Maria and, without thinking, embraced her. It was a desperate hug, laden with all the pain and confusion they both felt. Maria held him as if she were holding that baby again, her arms finally full after so long being empty. Mrs. Eleanor watched from her wheelchair, sobbing quietly. The security guard had discreetly stepped away, giving them space for this intimate and devastating moment. Valerie, however, was unmoved. She clapped her hands slowly, sarcastically. "What a touching scene! Truly moving. But it doesn't change anything, Robert. You're still going to give me what I want, half of everything, or this beautiful story will become a public scandal. Imagine the headlines. Millionaire entrepreneur discovers he was illegally bought. Empire built on crime. Your reputation will be ruined in a matter of hours." Robert pulled away from Maria, but kept his hands on her shoulders, as if needing that physical contact to believe it was real. When he looked at Valerie, there was something new in his eyes. It was no longer fear or confusion, it was determination. "Do what you want, Valerie. Tell whoever you want, I don't care anymore. I spent my whole life building an empire, accumulating money, chasing success. And for what? To impress people who don't care about me, to have a wife who only wanted me for what I could give her. To live in a cold, empty mansion? No, not anymore. The only thing that truly matters is right here. My real mother, and the woman who raised me with love, even knowing the truth. He looked at Mrs. Eleanor, who smiled through her tears. Valerie, you can have half the mansion. You can have the cars, the jewelry, everything you value so much. Because I found something far more valuable. I found where I come from. I found who I am, and that is priceless. Valerie's jaw dropped. This was not going as she had planned. Robert was supposed to be desperate, begging, submitting to her demands. He wasn't supposed to be standing there, defying her with this newfound calm. You're bluffing. You'll never give up everything you've built. I'm not giving it up. I'm just rearranging my priorities. And you, Valerie, are no longer one of them. Valerie's expression changed. Rage took over her face, distorting her once carefully composed features. She took a step forward, the bracelet still in her hands, and pointed a finger at Maria. So you're going to stay with her? With this maid? With this woman who couldn't even protect her own son? Enough! Mrs. Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a whip. Everyone turned to look at her. The elderly woman was standing. She had risen from her wheelchair, supporting herself on its arms with all her might, her face contorted in pain but firm with determination. That's enough, Valerie. You've caused enough suffering. Now get out of this house, now. Valerie laughed, a hysterical laugh. Or what, you're going to throw me out, you who can barely stand? That's when they heard the siren, the sound of approaching police cars. The security guard, who had stepped away to make a discreet call, had alerted the police. Minutes later, 3 officers entered through the front door, followed by a figure that made Valerie turn pale instantly, Oswald Mason, but he was in handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. One of the detectives, a middle-aged man with a tired but determined gaze, scanned the room until his eyes landed on Valerie. Valerie Anderson? She didn't answer, just stared from Oswald to the police, panic beginning to set in. We're investigating a child trafficking ring that operated over 2 decades ago. Your uncle, Oswald Mason, has confessed to everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's provided us with names, dates, documents, and your name comes up repeatedly. You were an accomplice in at least 3 cases of illegal baby selling, and you're also being charged with breaking and entering, theft and extortion. You'll have to come with us. Valerie tried to run, but the other officer was faster. He grabbed her by the arm and began to cuff her. She screamed, struggled, threatened to sue everyone, but it was no use. The child's bracelet fell from her hands to the floor. Maria quickly bent down and picked it up, holding it to her chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. As Valerie was being led away, shouting threats and obscenities, Oswald looked at Robert. There was something like remorse in his eyes. Sorry, kid. I've done a lot of wrong in my life, but the worst was separating you from your mother. It's haunted me for years. It's no excuse, I know. But when Valerie came to me, trying to use me to blackmail you, I realized it was time to stop, to confess everything, to try somehow to fix at least one of the lives I destroyed. Robert said nothing. He just watched as Oswald was led away. Part of him wanted to scream, to curse, to vent all the anger he felt. But another, larger and wiser part knew it wouldn't do any good. The past couldn't be changed, only accepted and somehow overcome. After the police left with Valerie and Oswald, the house fell silent. Mrs. Eleanor sat back down in her wheelchair, exhausted from the effort. Maria knelt beside her and took her hands. Thank you for giving me the chance to know my son, for loving him when I couldn't, for being the mother he needed. Mrs. Eleanor caressed Maria's face tenderly. You are an incredible woman, Maria, and Robert was very lucky to have 2 mothers who love him, because love doesn't divide, love multiplies. And now we are a family, a different, complicated, but a real family. Robert joined them, hugging the 2 women. He called Mother. It was strange, surreal, but also perfectly right, as if all the pieces of an impossible puzzle had finally fallen into place. In the days that followed, a lot changed. Robert held a press conference where he told his story. He spoke about being a victim of child trafficking, about discovering his origins, about the courage of his biological mother, who never stopped searching for him. The media, which he had feared so much, reacted in an unexpected way. Instead of destroying him, they turned him into a symbol of resilience and justice. He started a foundation dedicated to reuniting families separated by illegal adoptions. He used his resources and connections to push for changes in legislation, for more transparency in adoption processes, and for harsher punishments for those who profit from child trafficking. Valerie was tried and convicted. She got 8 years in prison for complicity in child trafficking, theft, and extortion. Oswald received 15 years, even with his confession and cooperation with the justice system. It was not enough, considering the magnitude of his crimes, but it was a start. The mansion was put up for sale. Robert realized he could no longer live there, not with all the bad memories that place held. He bought a smaller but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood in South London, a house with a garden, a porch with a view of the trees, and spacious, light-filled rooms. Maria moved in. She was given her own room, with a private bathroom and a small balcony where she placed plants and a bird feeder. Mrs. Eleanor came too, of course. Robert couldn't imagine life without either of his two mothers. It was strange at first. Maria had a hard time accepting that she no longer had to work as an employee. Robert insisted on transferring a generous sum to her account, compensation for the lost years, the suffering, the injustice. She tried to refuse, but he was adamant. And slowly, she learned to accept it. It wasn't charity. It was family taking care of family. They spent hours talking. Robert wanted to know everything about her childhood in rural Yorkshire, about her life before he was born, about the years of searching after he disappeared. And Maria told him, rediscovering memories she had buried for being too painful. Mrs. Eleanor joined in these conversations, adding details about Robert's childhood, showing old photos, sharing stories. There was no jealousy or resentment between the two women, only a deep understanding and a genuine friendship born from shared pain and love for the same man. 6 months after the revelation, on a sunny Saturday morning, the three of them were in the garden of the new house. Mrs. Eleanor was in her wheelchair, doing physical therapy with a professional Robert had hired. Her knees had fully healed, and she was regaining strength in her legs, slowly but surely. Robert was watering the plants, an activity he discovered brought peace to his restless mind. And Maria was sitting on a wooden bench, holding the blue child's bracelet with the star. She kept it with her always, sometimes in her pocket, sometimes around her wrist, sometimes just in her hands. It was her physical connection to the past, the tangible proof that all of this had really happened. Robert put down the hose and sat next to her. "What are you thinking about?" Maria smiled, a peaceful smile she hadn't had in decades. About how strange life is, how fate works in ways we never imagine. I spent 25 years looking for you, and all that time you were right there, so close. If someone had told me I would be here today, sitting in the garden with my son, I would never have believed it. Robert took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Me neither. But I'm happy. For the first time in a long time, I'm truly happy. It's not a superficial happiness based on achievements or possessions. It's something deeper. It's the feeling of finally knowing who I am, where I come from, and where I'm going." "And where are you going?" He looked around at the garden, at Mrs. Eleanor smiling as she did her exercises, at the house that was much smaller than the mansion, but infinitely more welcoming. "I'm going where I should have been all along, home, to family, to a love that doesn't depend on money or success, but just on being present, on caring, on choosing every day to be by the side of the people who truly matter." Mrs. Eleanor finished her physical therapy session and joined them, positioning her wheelchair next to the bench. "What are you two talking about?" "About how lucky we are," Maria replied. "Despite everything that happened, all the pain and injustice, we're lucky to have found each other, to have this chance to start over." Mrs. Eleanor nodded, her eyes shining. "Family isn't just about blood. Family is a choice. It's commitment. It's a love that persists even when all seems lost. And the three of us, with our complicated and impossible story, are proof that love always finds a way. They sat there, the three of them, in comfortable silence, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the peace they had earned. The past hadn't disappeared. The scars were still there, some deeper than others, but they had stopped bleeding. They had begun to truly heal. Maria thought of all the nights she had cried alone in her small flat, hugging a pillow, wondering where her son could be. She thought of all the birthdays she had celebrated alone, lighting a candle for a child she didn't know was still alive. She thought of all the pain, all the injustice, all the lost time. But when she looked at Robert, now a grown man sitting beside her, when she felt the warmth of his hand in hers, when she heard his laughter as he told a funny story to Mrs. Eleanor, she realized it was worth it. All the pain had been worth it to get to this moment, to have this garden, this peace, this impossible and perfect family. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Robert went inside to prepare dinner. He had discovered he enjoyed cooking, especially when it was for the people he loved. Maria and Mrs. Eleanor stayed in the garden, watching the first stars begin to appear in the sky. "You know what I've learned from all this?" said Mrs. Eleanor, breaking the silence. "What?" "That the truth always comes out. It might take years, even decades, but it always finds a way, and when it does, it can hurt, it can destroy things, it can change everything, but it also sets you free, free from lies, from guilt, from secrets that poison the soul. The truth hurts, but it also heals, and the three of us are proof of that." Maria nodded, looking at the blue bracelet in her hands. "And love. Love also finds a way. No matter how much time passes, how many obstacles there are. A mother's love for her child is indestructible, and that's what brought us here, that's what won in the end." They stayed there until Robert called them for dinner. They went into the house together, Maria pushing Mrs. Eleanor's chair, talking about trivial things, laughing at small jokes. Like a normal family. Like the family they always should have been. And that night, as they ate together at the kitchen table, as they shared stories and laughter, as they planned the future with renewed hope, the three of them knew that, despite the winding path they had traveled, despite all the tears and all the pain, they had arrived exactly where they needed to be. Home, with family, at peace. The marble mansion was in the past, being sold to another family who would fill its empty halls with new memories. Valerie was in prison, paying for the crimes she had committed. Oswald was also behind bars, finally facing the consequences of decades of cruelty. But Robert, Maria, and Mrs. Eleanor were there, in that simple but love-filled house, building the future that fate had tried to deny them. Proving that in the end, love always wins, that the truth always prevails. And that family care is not defined by blood alone, but by the bonds we choose to keep, the sacrifices we make, and the unconditional love we offer, even when all seems lost. The sun had set completely. The night covered London with its blanket of stars and city lights, and inside that house in the south of the city, three souls that had been shattered by life finally found their healing. Together, as they always should have been. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Maria, Robert, and Mrs. Eleanor has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of pain, truth, and reunion, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what marked you most in this story. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, showing that love always finds a way, and that the truth, however painful, always sets you free. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode for another story that will stir your emotions and make you believe that miracles happen even in the most unexpected places.